What we're talking about, as I said, is because of the party political conference season and Brexit, the conversation about Brexit overshadows all of that. So this week, I'm asking how Brexit will affect the UK's trade relations, particularly with the Caribbean and Africa. Are businesses here still going to be able to trade easily with them, with countries in the Caribbean and Africa? Or has the Brexit put a hurdle in the way, if you like, a stumbling block? And will the Caribbean and Africa want to continue to trade with British businesses? 02722422000 is the number to get involved. The Caribbean Enterprise Trade Mission is continuing to gain support from businesses here in the UK. Why is it so important to trade then with the Caribbean and Africa? And are we doing enough to build ties with our heritage countries? What can we learn from all of this? 02722422000. I'm joined in the studio by a great panel of guests. We've got Dr. Priscilla Schwartz with us, who's a senior lecturer at the Royal Dock School of Business and Law and director of the Energy and Natural Resources Law Programme at the University of East London. Good evening to you, Dr. Schwartz. Good evening. Yeah, good to have you with us. Maureen Smith is here. She's the owner and operator of Tropical Connections. Maureen.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. And Sean Robinson, owner of Robinson Davis Properties, is here.
Good evening. Hi.
Good to have you here. And Jonathan Farl, who's the founder and managing director of Rockstar Group, which is a lead company on the trade mission to the Caribbean. Jonathan, good to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
And we've got Dr. Attar in the studio as well. Dr. Attar, good evening.
Not doctor, but good evening.
Not doctor. I'm going to take that back from you if you don't mind. So it's a plain old mister.
Plain old mister.
Don't worry, so am I. As some of the best people are, as you know. Jonathan, to start with you first of all.
Sure.
What is this Caribbean trade mission all about?
Well, I mean, the whole focus of it is to really give businesses and British opportunities to really experience the Caribbean and the fantastic economic growth that it's seeing. Obviously, my group and company are very interested in launching and expanding our operations and services over there, with the potential to even look at floating that business in the near future in what is a growing and thriving stock exchange over there as well.
Yeah, well, you can't make money in the Caribbean, can you? No, seriously.
No, believe it or not, I mean, economically, it's growing very, very strongly, and a fantastic group of people to work with. I was there only in November, December last year, meeting businesses out there, and it's thriving. It's on the US's doorstep, and no, you can. Believe me, you can.
It's a one-trick pony, though, isn't it? After tourism, is there anything else that the Caribbean has to trade with?
No, I mean, if you obviously, putting aside the traditional industries that when one thinks of the Caribbean they associate with, but no, the population growth is very strong. Various industries, new technology as a business, believe it or not, is growing there. And like all growing economies, when you've got a middle class that's whose spending power is increasing, it's a great opportunity for service businesses to be there providing those services too. What my company does is it helps raise investment and grows the businesses. It teaches the right sort of business principles to grow companies through access to big name mentors and to give those Caribbean companies the opportunity to expand their existing products and services internationally. So that's one of the reasons where, as to why we have an interest in the trade mission.
Dr. Priscilla Schwartz, does Jonathan have a point there?
Yes, I think Jonathan's point is quite good. It's a growing economy, and they have a lot of opportunities in the trade market to come, especially with the Brexit thing that's happening. They one of the only members that have really had a stronger EPA with the European Union.
What's an EPA?
The Economic Partnership Agreement.
Okay, because I failed mathematics as well. I never really, but yeah. Just speaking our language.
Yeah, so they will have their cards close to their chest as to what they might want to pick in between the box. Yeah.
Why is it then, if what you're saying is fact, and I have no reason to believe that it isn't, but why is it that the Caribbean still is a net exporter of migrants? Why are people in the Caribbean going to the United States, to Canada and elsewhere to seek their fortune if it's such a hot economic bed?
Well, as you know, globalization has not augured well for everyone. So people are looking for better pastures. The standard of living could be better for professionals and other groups of people if they went out of the region. Because as trade open up, services open up, you get downs and highs. So people always take advantage of this opportunity. But that does not mean that the country is not picking up, they are not developing.
And are the countries themselves, countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, are they doing whatever it needs to, whatever they need to do? Are the governments there doing whatever they need to do to support the business infrastructure in those countries?
I don't think equipped to really talk about the political like structures outside the legal frameworks of the agreement. I don't know if any of my colleagues will want to, Jonathan, speak to that. Yeah. Thank you.
I think they certainly are. In comparison to other countries, I don't have the stats on that, but I do recall a couple of years ago that we were involved in sponsoring a trade mission that the Caribbean governments paid to have the most innovative companies from that region be paid to fly over to London. They put on a fantastic event at the Grosvenor Hotel in Mayfair, where we were sitting as one of the investment groups, listening and hearing the pitches of Caribbean businesses. So I think there is just as much focus from the Caribbean government about showcasing the existing fast growth companies there, with the effort to expand their customer base to the likes of London, the US, and other parts of the world. So from what I've seen, and as you can tell, I'm not originally from the Caribbean.
Well, no, that's why you're saying Caribbean rather than Caribbean.
Yes, exactly.
Never mind.
Guilty as charged. Yes, the first Caribbean from Australia. There you are.
That's okay. That's it. Maureen Smith, you're the owner and operator of Tropical Connections, as I said a moment ago. What is that? What is Tropical Connections?
It's a Caribbean property company. We specialise in Caribbean property. We deal with sales and purchases, house building projects. In essence, the company was set up 12 years ago because I realised that a lot of people in the UK primarily were experiencing challenges trying to buy, build, sell, not understanding procedures, practices, etc.
And these are returnees, are they, essentially?
Yes, they initially they were returnees, but we've now entered into my generation. British born, mummy and daddies are dying off, and the children don't have a clue how to deal with their matters over there. So that's what we do.
Is it essentially building property for people who want to go and live there permanently, or are we talking about holiday homes, or just an investment in what is perceived as being one's mother country or otherwise?
To be quite honest, it's I would say it's a mix, because you have some people, like even myself, for example, I like living in England, but I would invest in the Caribbean. And that way I can have my cake and eat it at the same time. So that means you've got the investment, so you can have the holiday home, or you can sometimes just want it as a retirement home. Because some people are coming to me now where they're saying when they get a little bit older, they're going to want to retire. So they will buy the properties now, or they'll build the properties now. Yes.
Do you know, my in-laws had a beautiful house up in Harrow, and the house, let's say, was worth about £375,000 in 1998 when they decided to retire early and return to the Caribbean. I begged them. I was on my knees begging them, imploring them not to sell their house, to go and rent out in Jamaica. And they wanted to build, they had that dream of returning home and building a big house, huge house, a palace, a veritable palace out there. And they took their money and they built a palace in Mandeville. And their Mandeville house is now worth £375,000, whereas their former home in London is probably about 1.5 million. Why would anybody want to invest in the Caribbean when you put it that way? It's particularly in property.
It's only because of a downturn, really and truly, as far as the properties are concerned, right? England property prices have gone up, but in the Caribbean, since the global financial crisis, that had a severe impact on property sales. So they haven't caught up with over here. There's no two ways about it, and you just can't do the comparison.
So it's not an investment; it's a loss leader, isn't it?
It's a loss leader for the people in the 80s, but I know how you can invest and make money in the 21st century.
You're going to have to tell us tonight. Now that you've said that, you're definitely going to have to tell us tonight. I'll come back to that. Sean Robinson, you're the owner of Robinson Davis Properties, and when I said a moment ago, why would anybody want to invest in the Caribbean properties? I looked at you, and you seem to agree with me in that respect.
Well, I specialise in. You said that your parents' house was in Harrow. That's where my office is at. Actually,
yeah.
But the prices. I specialise in residential lettings.
Yeah.
In and around London. And I've just watched over the past few years the prices just keep on creeping up, and prices just becoming more expensive, and the younger generation not having a chance to buy.
So, why would buying or investing in the Caribbean or Africa be a solution?
I don't see my generation investing in the Caribbean. It's more kind of the older generation. Our mum's retirement, sell their home here, go back home, buy something, build a palace, as you said, and just relax and enjoy the money.
Has that been made easier or more difficult with Britain's leaving the European Union with this Brexit? Or not?
With easier or...
in one way, we know that the pound has fallen.
Yeah.
So the value of their property when they take it and transfer it to US dollars will be a lot less.
Yeah.
I mean, some 10, 15, 20% less than it was just a few months ago. So that would suggest that it's even more difficult. If they didn't sell up and buy and invest in the Caribbean in June or before June, they're in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I definitely agree. So, I think the Brexit would have had an effect on the, house prices and the purchasing of properties back in the Caribbean. So, makes sense what you're saying.
So, how would one get around that now? If you're a person of a certain age who has worked all their life here in Britain, and you know this scenario over and over again, we all know it, worked all their lives in Britain, they dream of returning home or to their ancestral home in the Caribbean or in Africa, and having a home there, all expenses paid and everything like that, and yet they're not able to get quite the substantial pile that they would have before. How do they get around that now? Is it something that they just have to accept, or would you advise them to keep their money in Britain, where we know the property price is going to go up, and go and perhaps rent in their ancestral homes?
It's a good question. But
that's why I asked.
Yeah, it's a good question. Investment is, in my eyes, the better option. Yeah. Okay, investing back home.
Back home is a better option. Why? Tell me why.
Because this is, it helps. Just helps the property market. Try and encourage the property market to develop more, because you're investing your money kind of back home. Yeah. You can still have something here, but as well as have something back there as well. So you have kind of double investments. Try it if possible. Invest back home and also invest in the UK, London, if you can.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, Doctor, we're not allowed to call you Doctor. What should we call you then?
Sir would be nice, but Mr. Attar is fine.
Yeah, Mr. Attar. What about a first name though?
Del or Dele.
Yeah, I like Dele. Yeah. Dele is a good, because it's like Daley Thompson. You know his name's Dele.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got Dele Alli, of course, of Tottenham. So it's getting a more common name now. Dele Attar. First of all, your thoughts on how Brexit is affecting trade between Britain, and I do mean between people of Caribbean and African heritage in Britain, not exclusively though, and the trade in the Caribbean and Africa. What would you say?
Well, I think it represents a great opportunity. And
why?
Because with Brexit, there had always been a focus on immigration from existing EU countries, where historically, I think the people around the table originate from Africa and the Caribbean. That, as a member of the EU, Britain lost its focus on its previous communities. This will be the second trade mission to the Caribbean. I was involved in the first. And with due respect to the people around the table who focused on property, it's not the only way of investing.
Sure. No.
There is plenty of talent in the Caribbean, I visited the incubator units at the University of Kingston last time I was there, and there is a skill set there waiting for to offer their services to a marketplace.
Hold that thought, because I want to bring Francis in South Kensington in on the conversation. 0207 224 2000 is my number. Francis, good evening.
Good evening, Dotun.
What do you make of this opportunities in the Caribbean and Africa post-Brexit?
It's fantastic. I'll tell you, I've invested money in Ghana. And I'll tell you something, Dotun. These are some of the fastest growing economies in the world. Yes, they've had their dips. But people should remember one thing. No, Dotun, if you had told the world 25 years ago, or even 20 years ago, that China would become the biggest economy on earth, everyone would have laughed at you. The reality is, if you had told the world that Europe and the Eurozone will be in crisis, everyone would have laughed at you. If you had told them Greece will be bankrupt, everyone would have laughed at you. And if you had told them Britain would vote to leave the EU just even 5 years ago, they would have laughed at you.
And if you told them that Africa and the Caribbean was not a great place to invest all your millions 50 years ago, they wouldn't be laughing now, would they?
No, because I'll tell you something. A lot of friends of mine, including myself and some members of my family, bought land in Accra when the land and property prices was next to nothing. Now, they are sitting on a gold mine because a lot of foreign companies are buying up these land and they are paying premium prices to build their headquarters in these countries. And I'll tell you something, Dotun, in 20, 25 years' time, these countries will be right up there. Let's not fool ourselves. No matter what the media says about these countries, some of the fastest growing economies are in Africa and the Caribbean.
Then why are we not investing in these countries to the levels that you're talking about?
No, but people are investing in these countries. It's just, people don't talk about it. The Western media don't talk about it. There's a lot of investments going into these countries. You go to a lot of countries in West Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, things are happening. A lot of the new generation, some of them born here. I was born here. I grew up in Ghana. I came back, but I still invest and do a lot of business in Ghana. And I have a lot of friends, second, third generation, who do the same. But nobody talks about it because it's like, the dark continent, let's leave it as it is. But you know something? At the end of the day, Dotun, I can assure you, we'll be having a laugh.
Francis, I sincerely hope so, Francis, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And Francis has, I suppose, put the agenda on the table, firmly on the table for us. Post-Brexit, there are opportunities in Africa and the Caribbean. So are we about to embrace those opportunities or not? Deliata, I interrupted you as you were speaking. You were saying that quite apart from property, there are so many other opportunities in the Caribbean and elsewhere, in Africa, let's say, that people aren't perhaps jumping on top of. You said you were part of this first trade mission. What was that like? Why was it put together in the first place, by the way?
Well, the first trade mission was put together to attempt to bridge the gap between Africa and the Caribbean. So there were Nigerian companies on the mission, and we visited Jamaica and Trinidad. Didn't quite get round to Barbados. That was to show the size of potential markets. A phrase that was used by some of the people on the first mission were Nigeria and Ghana together is a marketplace of about 220 million people, all of whom look like and share many common traits with people in the Caribbean.
But they don't have the cash, do they? And many of those 220 million are broke.
This is another myth that's peddled by people. Africa is not as broke and bankrupt as some people would have you believe. One of the interesting statistics is Jamaica had one of the fastest growing stock exchanges in the world. I met the head of the Jamaica and Barbados stock exchanges. But if you want to invest, you can invest in that market. If you're trying to raise funds, it's about $40,000 to raise money on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Trying to raise money on a junior stock exchange in London will probably cost you at least £250,000. So there's a great way to invest outside property.
With all due respect, though, the Jamaican Stock Exchange is a junior stock exchange to the stock exchanges of Tokyo, London, New York. And we know, do we not? We know this from examples in history that the raw produce of Caribbean countries and African countries are determined by the stock exchanges in New York, in London, in Tokyo, and elsewhere. If they decide that the price of bauxite, which is Jamaica's raw produce, the price of bauxite should be tuppence halfpenny a ton, then the whole industry collapses, and so does your investment.
But the Western world are looking to invest in services and service economies and brain power. And there's plenty of brain power in Africa and the Caribbean, which doesn't revolve around commodity markets. So therefore, if we have talented individuals who can work, for instance, in the digital economy or other service economies, their value should be the same as what, for instance, India have done with outsourcing. And therefore, there are investments which are not to do with raw materials and commodity prices. It is talent. And talent flows all around the world and does not always know the traditional boundaries of physical goods.
It's a very good point. And we're talking about the impact of Brexit on trade generally, but specifically about how Black Britons will be affected by that. And we're talking about trade missions to the Caribbean and Africa and whether they offer a solution, whether things have been positive or negative as a result of the referendum. 0207-224-2000. Give us your thoughts. We're learning a lot, aren't we, about trade and trading with these other countries that many of us call home, or at least our parents did. 0207-224-2000. Give me your thoughts, please. But first, let's get the latest BBC Radio London travel and now news with Catherine White. Fascinating conversation we're having this evening on BBC Radio London. This is Dotun on Sunday. Love you to join in. 0207-224-2000. You know how the government is saying that, look, we don't need to be members of the European Union to do trade deals all around the world. We can make our own way. We could do trade deals individually with countries like the United States, like China, and elsewhere across the world. That is the case, and that is what the International Business Secretary Liam Fox is charged with doing now and sorting out, amongst other things. And Theresa May is very keen on this as well. But what about the situation for Black Britons? How has Brexit affected the way that we do business? And can we ourselves go and think, well, Europe isn't the be end and end all. Can we perhaps make links? Is it the time to make firmer links with those countries that we have historical allegiances with? 0207-224-2000. I'm speaking primarily about countries in the Caribbean and Africa. Give me your thoughts, please. Would you invest in the Caribbean and Africa? If so, why? If not, why not? Lots of issues around both sides of that question, I'm sure. In the studio with me, we've got Jonathan Farl, who's the founder and managing director of Rockstar Group, which is the lead company on a current trade mission to the Caribbean that's happening in January, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's
January.
January. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. We've also got with us Dele Atta, who is the managing director of Bizitas Limited, which is an IT business systems company. You were involved in the first UK Caribbean trade mission that you've been telling us about. Dr. Priscilla Schwartz is here, senior lecturer at the Royal Dock School of Business and Law, director of the Energy and Natural Resources Law Programme at the University of East London. We've got Maureen Smith with us as well, owner and operator of Tropical Connections, which is a property firm, and Sean Robinson is an owner of the Robinson Davis property firm as well, both who do business in the Caribbean and Africa and elsewhere as well. So a general question, I'll throw this out there then. Let's start with you, if I may, Dr. Schwartz. The idea that we can individually do our own trade deals with companies in different countries, or as a community, Black Britons can do, like this trade mission suggests, deals with a sector of the world which perhaps doesn't really do much business with Britain. Well, what do you make of that? Is that fanciful to a certain extent?
Yes, it's fanciful. But it's really not that straightforward. There are a lot of complexities because there must be a distinction here between the investment, which our earlier caller Francis was talking about. I see there was a lot of emphasis put on investments that has gone, and these are really multinational companies and corporations, which sort of tends to deviate from the heavily focused when you talk about African, Caribbean and international trade. The focus is about products trade and goods trade, not necessarily investments and services, because that's sort of like hid in the kind of legal arrangements that are in place. There are opportunities and there are also downsides, but it will actually depend on what Britain chooses to do, really, at the end of it all on the EU, because it's already...
So it's Britain rather than us individually, then?
Yes.
We have to let the government take the lead.
Individuals having capital can always go and set up businesses. That one, there are no restrictions. It's just if they choose to want to benefit from certain privileges, then the issue of whether you have support from your country, especially if you're dealing with robust countries, in countries that do not have strict regulations, that do not have protection rights of investors and that kind of thing. So you would probably want to fall back on bilateral agreements. But otherwise, I think companies, as long as you have your capital, these countries are free. You can move, you can invest, and I would encourage, as he says, for citizens to be looking at these opportunities from the bigger package of what Britain can do. It's a bit more complex than that, but I think certainly we could all think of investing there.
Jonathan?
I think, of course, companies can do deals internationally and do all the time. Mm-hmm. Going back to your question, though, about can Britain do deals with other countries outside of the EU? Of course they can, and they've been doing so for many, many years. The complexity, of course, that we're facing now is when Area 50, or what, the term they use? Document 50, Article 50, apologies.
Whatever that is.
Whatever that thing is. When they sign it, which is still months and months away, it's 2 years from there anyway. It is a huge mess. It is going to take a long time, but what's fantastic so far is the British economy and the rest of the world are looking at the British economy and knowing that it's business as usual. We saw 2 days of the stock market crash, and we saw a recovery ever since then, and it's still going well, and the consumer confidence in the UK still does remain strong. And the likes of Germany, and when you look at Germany and Mercedes and BMW, who are their biggest consumers? You know, who consumes more?
But that's Europe and Britain.
Of
but
course.
I'm saying beyond that. I mean, I wonder whether, to a certain extent, Maureen Smith, I wondered whether to a certain extent that the relationship with Europe that Britain has had over the last 43 years or so has not diminished the historical colonial ties that Britain had with the Caribbean and Africa. There was a point when I was a very young man in Africa where most of the cars on the streets would have been British cars. You can't see a British car in Africa or even in the Caribbean anymore, for example. All those kind of close connections seem to have disappeared. And I wonder whether it's been, in terms of close relationships, it's been going backwards over the last 43 years when Britain has been part of the European Union, and whether this Brexit offers a new opportunity to start again and forge closer links with those countries that Britain has a historical connection with and always has.
I do agree. I don't think that Britain's links with the Caribbean and Africa, Commonwealth countries, has been as strong as it probably could be. I really don't think that it has been. I mean, for example, you'll see, I can speak for the Caribbean. I've been to Gambia, but Gambia is the only African country I've been to, and I wasn't there.
It's good enough. Little tiny country built around a river, good enough.
Well,
tourist destination, good enough.
It's a tourist destination, yeah.
With an autocratic leader, I should say, but let's leave that to one side.
Oh,
we won't get involved in the politics unless we have to.
Yeah, we won't sort of mention that. But I do think that now is the time for African and Caribbean people in Britain to really wake up and become more self-sufficient instead of depending on Britain. and whatever, because remember, a lot of the agreements that Dr. Priscilla mentioned, I think, although it's between Britain and Commonwealth countries, and I don't want to speak about something I don't really know, I have a feeling that there's something to do with the EU, that those agreements are going to be affected, and it may not be in a positive way. So my philosophy in life is always do for yourself, and I think that Africa and the Caribbean really is in a position where they can. And they've got a lot of people in the diaspora who can take skills.
Although it's funny that both Dr. Shorts and Dele earlier both mentioned one thing. I mean, Dr. Shorts mentioned capital. If we can bring capital, that's what we have over here that they want. Mm-hmm. And Dele was saying afterwards, what they have that we want is intellectual property, Sean Robinson. I mean, if all we can do is offer money to the Caribbean, then we're just the masters of their destiny, aren't we? We're not offering them anything else, are we? Really?
Well, if I just extend on that, capital does not necessarily limited to financial capital. It can be human capital, resource capital, skills capital. I mean, it's anything you can deal with or you can trade with. Really, and I think that is the focus really that we should be pushing, because we have skill sets here that are still lacking in those parts. Most of the agreements that are sort of like binding the EU and these relationships have been really on trade. They've been very nervous in letting it go into investment or services sector, you know, on the sales skill sector, competition sector, because they've sort of like been there's been a lot of distrust in the relationship within the EU. So as you mentioned,
they want our money,
yeah.
Dr. Schwartz. I mean, it's very good of you to expand the remit of capital. They want our money, particularly in the Caribbean, which is such small economies. So if they build anything in the Caribbean, they need to export it, don't
and
they, to
we
make
want
things
their
work.
resources too.
They
so
want our money.
Yes, and we want their resources too. So it's sort of like a two-way street. Sort of like we all need each other in this global system of play. It will be difficult for Britain to go at it alone without having a strategy to take on the other competitors.
I will get to you in a moment, Sean. Do forgive me, but I know Dele's chomping at the bit to get into this conversation. 0207 224 2000 our number if you'd like to join in this discussion. Yeah, Dele Atta.
One of the things I'd like to build on what Dr. Priscilla said, and that is about know-how. And so much of the service industries are about know-how and experience. And they don't just want our money, they also want access to know-how and experience so that they can build something that's self-sufficient. The other thing about this, where, getting back to our topic on Brexit, is I've seen the boundaries go up to physical immigration. Up until 1983, there were not the same visa requirements for people travelling to the UK from the Caribbean. Luckily, if you're using digital media, they're not subject to visas. So a lot of the intellectual property can flow irrespective of whether people physically...
I do genuinely want to come back to that topic, which I will do in just a moment. I just want to bring Ade in Hendon into the conversation. Ade, good evening.
How are you doing, Dotun? You okay there?
I'm very well, thanks so much. Would you invest in Nigeria?
Well, of course I would. First of all, before I go, I want to congratulate the architect, David Ajay, for designing the African-American Museum
of Culture, and yeah, absolutely,
which is designing
history
our
and culture.
artifacts.
And he's a British African-born.
But what I'm saying is that the way he did it in the Yoruba fila, the Yoruba that we wear, that's a sign of it. That's a
is that what it is? I didn't even realise. So he's taking the design from a Nigerian cultural artifact.
Well, of course, it's a Yoruba. The design is different. It differs from everything else, as you know, in the mouth. Everything else is whitewash, isn't it? I know.
Yeah.
Obviously, the building is allowed to be taller, but it's designed in the Yoruba ways. Anyway, long story short.
Yeah, exactly. Later on, we'll talk about the African American Museum later on in the program. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it was very, very important, Dotun. So we have to invest back in Africa.
Why should we invest in Africa and lose our shirts? Why? Tell me why.
What my Ghanaian brother was the first caller you had, Francis, I agree entirely with him. I mean, look at Eco Atlantic, the big development that's happening in our areas. You're a Lagosian like me, yeah? I mean, I know I've invested there.
You go and ask people like Jeffrey Daniel, they're African American. Go and ask Beyonce. They all want to take the buy shops there and properties there. So there you are. So it's happening both ways.
They can afford to lose their money. They can afford. It's a risky investment, isn't it? Risky investment. Investment. Isn't it safer to put your money in a bank in the UK and go and invest it in Africa or the Caribbean? I'm asking a question, only.
Dotun. No, it's not at all. Not at all. I entirely disagree with you. I mean, you made this comment a while ago about Mercedes-Benz. I mean, you know that there's probably more Mercedes-Benz in Nigeria than there are even in Germany. So it's not only Europe that consumes German product cars. You know, in fact, they even got a showroom in Lagos. I don't know when last you've been to Lagos, Dotun. You know, to be able to clarify.
I was last in Lagos. Good question. 2010, I was last in Lagos. But thanks for asking.
All right. Even Gottaleb, Fernando Porsche, they've also a franchise showroom, so they can serve Porsche. So there is money in Africa to be made. But the most important thing, we have to invest there. I would definitely. I have a lot of investment in Lagos. So there you go, Dotun. So
I really appreciate it. Yeah, no. Oh, look, I do appreciate your telling us about it, Ade, and thank you very much. I hope that triggers some other people to call up as well and tell us about their investments or otherwise, whether they would or they wouldn't invest in Africa and the Caribbean. Lots of reasons as to why you should or why you shouldn't. You know, one of the reasons as to why you should is, as our guests have already said, not least Dr. Priscilla Schwartz, who knows what she's talking about. She's an academic. She says that, look, you know, your investment is worth a lot more money down there than it is here in the UK, arguably. Jonathan Fowle, who's a managing director of Rockstars, also said that as well. There's a lot of money to be made. Those are the good reasons, but then there are pitfalls as well. One of the pitfalls, Delia Attar mentioned just a moment ago, Sean Robinson, which is that there are physical boundaries to immigration or migration. You know, if you want to do business with somewhere in the Caribbean or Africa, you'll get a visa very, very easily. You go in there, you tell them you're going to invest some money, they'll give you a visa. Yeah. If they want to come over here, they're not going to get as easy a ride, are they? Right. And since the 1980s, we've seen a complete, the immigration coming from the Caribbean completely disappear. There's no immigration from the Caribbean, or virtually none anymore in the UK. People from the Caribbean go to the United States or Canada because it's a lot easier for them to go there. So we've lost the Caribbean influence completely. How much is migration a result, and the borders, the barriers to migration, a result of us having been in the European Union? Will it be worse or better now that we've left the European Union? From a business point of view, do you think?
Well, I think it should be a better thing. With the Brexit.
Why would it be a better thing? Yeah.
Well, you know, because I heard that the immigration from the Caribbean to come to the UK, the laws will change and would be reduced, so it'll be a lot easier for people from the Caribbean to come to the UK. Don't know how true that is, but something I heard, which would be a good thing. Because then obviously people from the Caribbean could come to the UK, and they could obviously, do employment and obviously get into different jobs and stuff like that. So yeah, I think hopefully it should be a good thing.
Which are the industries, from what you see there, apart from property, which are the industries from there that you would think you would invest in? Clearly, tourism is a primary industry in many of those countries, and I know that, for example, Jamaica is a world leader in the all-inclusive hotels. Controversially, because of course the poor sufferer who used to have his little higgler van down at the bottom of the road where the hotel entrance is, he's not getting paid anymore. He's starving. His picnic are starving, so he's got to work for the corporate hotels and everything just to make a living. So it's controversial, but nevertheless, world leaders in that kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing that is worth investing in?
Are we talking about the Caribbean now? Yeah.
But investing in from the Caribbean, whether they export it overseas, because they've exported, sandals and all those companies are all over the world now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
So they've managed to expand their property portfolio beyond the remit of the Caribbean, and you'll find them in Turkey or elsewhere.
Yeah.
So is that the kind of thing that is worth investing in? Will that bring in the foreign currency, which is really what they want?
No. Personally, no.
What about drinks and food? Food and drinks. You know, we've seen Mr. Reggae Sauce essentially take up a Caribbean jerk sauce culture and develop it over here, for example. And I imagine there are hundreds of companies in the Caribbean, not least Grace Foods and things like that. Thinking, hang on a second, that was our idea.
Yeah.
Because we can't make the money. What would you do for them? What would you say that they're not doing right when they're trying to export their foodstuffs over here?
It's about, I don't know, probably the way the brand is being marketed. Probably that helps, because obviously there was a gap in the market, but Levi Roots just came in at the right time, and he grabbed it. Maybe they should have concentrated their marketing towards the European market side, I would say.
And Dr. Schwartz, there is a cultural gap, isn't it? I mean, the way that Sean describes what Levi Roots did is right, because Levi Roots bridged the cultural gap. If you didn't know what jerk sauce was before, you probably do now. Whereas, Grace Foods or wherever have been trying to sell jerk sauce for years and years and years, never really gotten anywhere. There is a cultural gap in business that we have to try and bridge, isn't there, as well?
That's correct. But the problem that we are likely to face there, as I say, will depend, because those are products, and of course it's good that they are being produced here, or they are being exported here, or there's a cross way between the Caribbean and here. But once Brexit happens, then the tariff rules will sort of like kick in, and it will be difficult for those producers of those products what they are making, unless the UK decides to sort of keep those same arrangements that are afforded to the ACP countries under that agreement in place. Then they might suffer the tariff flog on the 40% sort of like on their
40%.
products. Well, the current thing, they might not have it now because they have an EPA which allows that access, that reciprocal arrangements between them. But when Britain leaves, certainly.
But Britain will still want to sell.
Exactly. So
Britain will still want to sell its products.
Them.
But Britain will still want to sell its products to Africa and the Caribbean, and it won't want high tariffs on its products going into those countries. So it'll be reciprocal, won't it? That they won't put high tariffs here from products coming over from there.
It will need to renegotiate its terms with the EU.
Why do we need tariffs? Why do we need trade tariffs?
Well, nobody wants it. I think that's what that's what the initial free trade neoliberal liberalization was about in the first place. That it will come a point when borders are dropped and deregulation takes place, and we all can just take our goods and go across, including our persons. That brings migration inside. As the policies became political, migration was left behind, and that had a different discipline where countries use the political system. So the goods can come in, but not the people. So tariffs then are used as it was supposed to be a trade tool, a strictly trade tool. Sure. But of course, the EU social direction of its policy has sort of like linked it with sort of like a carrot and a stick way of forcing states to be able to.
It's more of a stick than a carrot, though. I haven't tasted any carrot. I've just felt the stick and the pain from it as well.
For countries, they're used as a tool. Yeah.
Jonathan Fowle, I said you founder and managing director of Rockstar. What is that? What is the Rockstar Group? What do you actually trade in?
Well, so Rockstar has a number of companies inside the group. Started in 2007, and effectively its goal, and it helps businesses in the UK and now in other parts of the world grow faster. So we have our own investment fund here in the UK. We have over 100 credible entrepreneurs who have started, built up and sold companies for large sums, and they go into businesses with our capital. We fund them, we create boards around them, and we grow and we build them.
Gosh.
So where our interest in the Caribbean market has been for the last couple of years with one of the mentors in the group, who actually was the gentleman who invited me on the mission and invited me here this evening, is this is still very much a developing and growing economy.
Sure.
So it's in terms of its size, in terms of its potential, it's still in its infancy. However, the stock market, the Jamaican stock market last year, the stock exchange, according to Bloomberg, was the number one performer in 2015.
Really?
And that's a pretty impressive stat. So the reason we've been asked to come over to this trade mission is to really spend time on identifying the fast-growing Caribbean. Let me get that right this time. Let me get that right. I keep saying Caribbean. Caribbean is to come in and look and identify which are the best performing Caribbean businesses currently on the stock market and how we can help them expand and export and grow. But at the same time, we've also been asked to consider ourselves, or at least one of the companies in our group, to list on one of the stock exchanges in the Caribbean. Because as they're growing and as they're seeing more people invest in, there's more interest. It reminds me of China, about 5-10 years ago when their stock exchange really started in its infancy, and all of a sudden everyone in that country is talking about buying shares, investing in shares on the market, and it's still, as I said, very much in its infancy. So as Delhi was saying before, it's a fraction of the cost for any UK company or any company internationally to list there. There's a growing number of shareholders who are interested, and if you are a company that doesn't just have the exposure of producing in the Caribbean and then exporting, rather that you actually have an international presence but are listed on that exchange, then one of the things we're exploring is, will that be appealing to those already investing on the Caribbean stock exchanges?
You want to come in on that, Delhi?
Well, one of the things is, if you take the Caribbean market as a whole, it's 35 million people, which is still actually significant. It's a significant. If you look at each island individually, yes, Jamaica may have 3 million. The rest are quite small. But 35 million in total. But if you take on board also the diaspora in Canada, the States, and particularly in the UK, it's still a significant sized market. One of the things my company is doing is, we, in the last trade mission, a Nigerian company actually purchased a Jamaican reinsurance company to get a foothold, and that was one of the most positive outcomes. We've been asked by that company, Priority Group, to put in place the systems and disciplines to allow them to meet all the statutory reporting requirements of internationally listing on a stock exchange. Now, once you have that discipline, your listing could be moved. But that's what we mean about know-how, because if you are going to invest capital, and by this we mean financial capital, you need to know things will be regulated. Well, because of the colonial links, a lot of the Caribbean's laws are based on UK law anyway, or at least some form of international law. So there are safeguards, but the other things is the SME companies, the small and medium-sized enterprises, need also those skills that will allow them to meet the compliance and make them attractive investments, and it addresses your previous issue of, aren't we just going to waste our money? Well, you are controlled by international law, and really, could it be any worse than BHS or what happened over here?
Oh, you had to bring that in, didn't you? You had to bring that in.
Well,
yeah, that's a very valid point. But okay, but Maureen Smith and Daddy did kind of touch on this, which is, when he talks about the regulations and making sure that companies adhere to the rules and regulations and to the financial parameters of doing business and so on. He's talking about a cultural shift. And what I find with a lot of the businesses, what I was talking to Sean Robinson about when we were talking about Grace Foods, etc., was the difficulty for companies, let's say in the Caribbean, let's even talk about property, for you to get people's heads around. And I'll come back to this in a moment. Just have this thought in your head. For you to get people's heads around investing in the Caribbean, you have to explain the cultural context of that. That's what I want to talk about in the next half an hour. 027224200. Feel free to join in the conversation as well. But first, let's get the latest BBC Radio London news. And now travel with Pippa Sparks.
BBC Radio London at the weekend.
Dotun Adebayo on Sunday.
Call 020 722 42000.
Dotun Adebayo, Sundays from 8.
BBC Radio London.
And that number again, 027224200, if you'd like to join in the conversation. We're talking about trade, and we're talking about trade between Britain and the Caribbean and Africa post-Brexit. How easy or hard is it? Has it been made easier? or has it been made more difficult? Give us your thoughts, please. 0207 224 2000. Also, would you be interested in investing in the Caribbean or Africa yourself? Surely we've got historical links with those regions of the world. What should we make of those historical links then? Will they benefit us post-Brexit? Are those historical links closer now as a result of us leaving the European Union? Are we closer again as we once were to these great countries that we have so long shared history with? 027224 2000. So in that case, it's a good thing that we've left the European Union, that manages to make us think that it was Europe that was a closer link. Well, we know it's not true. 027224 2000. In the studio with me, Maureen Smith, who's the owner and operator of Tropical Connections. We've got Sean Robinson, owner of Robinson Davies Properties. Jonathan Farl is the founding managing director of Rockstar Group, which is a lead company on one of the trade missions to the Caribbean. There have been 2 trade missions, or there have been one. There's going to be a second one in January, which is a trade mission that is going from people here, businesses here in Britain, to the Caribbean and Africa to try and link up with businesses over there. Dr. Priscilla Schwartz is a senior lecturer at the Royal Dock School of Business and Law, director of the Energy and Natural Resources Law Programme at the University of East London. And, we've got Deli Attar with us as well. And he's the managing director of Bizitas Limited, which is an IT business systems company. He was involved in the original UK Caribbean trade mission. What was that like? Tell us what that was like.
Very interesting, because I wasn't really quite sure what to expect, but we spent 6 days in Trinidad and 6 days in Jamaica.
Oh, so it was a jolly then? It was a nice holiday on the beach?
It was. We were in Trinidad for Carnival, but we didn't party. We met the British consul and trade missions. We met with the Jamaican and Trinidad Chambers of Commerce and talked to them about opportunity. So we met a lot of business leaders and a lot of other businesses that were looking to promote inward investment, but also looking for markets for their products outside the Caribbean. And it was billed as Africa and the Caribbean. And one of the things that was highlighted to people in the Caribbean was just the size of the African market and the opportunity. And again, think of it this way. MTN, who are a South African company, mobile phones, moved their headquarters from South Africa to Nigeria because of the size of the Nigerian market. With about 150 million mobile handsets, that's an enormous market. That's France and the UK together. So there is money in Africa. The other thing that was looked at was licensing for vehicles, and the company were pushing that. Now, across Nigeria, again, 35, 40 million vehicles to be licensed. So if the systems of registration can work in Nigeria, those same systems can work across the Caribbean.
How were you generally received by people in the Caribbean and Africa when you went over?
It was a very warm reception. People were extremely inquisitive as well to find out the extent of the opportunity, and it was an eye-opener for people on both sides, because when you look at what the Caribbean has to offer, if they're to trade directly with Africa, that's huge markets, and some of the other tariffs don't come into play, and there is a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship and personal enterprise outside government.
And that first trade mission was when? Last year?
It was 3 years ago.
3 years ago. So the second one, Jonathan, that you're going to be attending in January, you heard Dele there. You can't party if the carnival's on at the same time.
No, we're called Rockstar. We'll find a way to party at least some time of the
Are
on the
you
trip.
expecting the same kind of warm reception that Dele describes now?
I'd like to hope so. Absolutely. And I think that there's an extension of the countries on this one, isn't there?
It's including Barbados this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you left the Bajans out last time?
I think due to time, they weren't happy, and that's why we're going to make sure we are there in force to sample their hospitality and investigate the opportunities.
Maureen Smith, I've said you're the owner and operator of Tropical Connections. How can people get hold of Tropical Connections? Is there a website or anything like that?
Yeah, we have a website. It's on tropicalconnections.co.uk.
Right, and for people, what kind of inquiries do people generally pose to you?
On the actual real estate side, it's property sales, purchases, house building projects. But then we also help to facilitate procedures for title applications, property disputes, letters of admin in the cases of probate. And I need to say as well that if a sentence has the word property and Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, we do it.
Oh, right, okay.
Simple as that.
Okay, I thought you were going to say, if it has that, I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that. But I'm going somewhere else. I'm going somewhere else with this. Because at the top of the programme, you said that part of what you do is try and straighten out some of the problems that people have when they want to invest in property, when they want to return home to the Caribbean. They meet certain challenges, not least the way that business is done over there. And I was saying before we went to news and travel about cultural differences. When you're trying to establish a business, and by business I mean an investment as well, when you're trying to establish a business and investment, there is a cultural gap that you have to bridge. What are the kind of things you have to put into the heads of Britons wanting to invest in the Caribbean about the way things are done over there and what they should expect, what kind of hurdles that they might meet?
I think because of how we're actually structured, it means that a lot of our clients bypass what falls on us as a company to deal with, if that makes sense. Yes? So you're not having to worry about the attorney, whether it's a reputable attorney or not, because we sort it. You're not having to worry.
Is there such a thing as an unreputable attorney?
Yeah, man, I have some seriously fantastic attorneys in the Caribbean that I work with. I found them.
Yeah.
And it's also, if you're accustomed... I'm trying not to laugh. This is a serious program.
Oh, of course
okay?
it is. Yeah. Of course it is.
But no, honestly, I mean, I'm not going to... I don't believe in defending the indefensible. And there are instances where some of the attorneys have not, and that is the honest truth. They've not performed as they should do for the profession. But it's really a case of just identifying who you can trust. You have to do research. Like anything else, you have to do your research. But we do that as a company. But if somebody doesn't want to use us and they want to go out there, well, if you say to an attorney that you want to do a particular transaction and they don't, and you ask them for a breakdown of the fees, for example, and they're not forthcoming, well, there's your warning. You're not going to still continue and then find that your fees are astronomical and so on. But there are cultural differences. I mean, I'm British born, but I spent some time in Barbados. My parents are Barbadians, and I spent some time in Barbados as a child. And once I came back here, I sort of forgot about the Caribbean and so on. But when I first started 12 years ago, it was a bit of a shock. Like, I'll write to you and you don't respond. But this all comes down to the training. And I think once the training is there and also communicating with people, I'm not going in sort of, I know best, and because you're exposing yourself to being possibly received in a negative way. But I say, let's share information. Tell me what's going on your side, and let me tell you what's going on, and that's how you do it, really and truly.
You see, there was so much information in what Maureen said about you send an email, you don't reply. But as my great mentor, the late great Peter Tosh, used to say, every time you call me, tell you, say, me soon come. That's a Caribbean thing. The Spanish say mañana.
That's right.
The people in the Caribbean say, me soon come, soon come, soon come.
Yeah.
Business soon done, soon done. We'll come to that in a moment. Let's bring in Ray in Norwood into the conversation. Ray, good evening.
Good evening, Dotun, and your panel.
Good evening to you, sir.
I just get very annoyed about the fact that every time we speak about Africa and the Caribbean, we sound like a breadbasket. And yet we are the country that supplied everything China wants. We supply everything America wants. We supply everything Britain wanted. Airplanes and everything were made from aluminium and things that came out of the Caribbean.
Oh, so we didn't make the planes. We just provided the raw produce, which was there in the earth in any case. So we didn't really do anything, did we?
Metals to make the different parts.
I know, but we didn't do anything. Even in Nigeria, the oil was just there. In fact, we don't even drill the oil out of the ground. Somebody else goes and drills the oil. So we haven't done anything except sit on this great, immense wealth and natural.
We didn't see it, but the countries that have used it well have made billions and trillions out of it over those years. Britain, America, China is doing well. Everybody's doing well out of Africa.
Yeah, but
and Africa isn't getting any of it.
But, as John Stuart Mill said, when the Native Americans complained that they owned the land and they were there first, he said, look, just because you own the land and you had all the apple trees on it, doesn't mean it belongs to you. When you put a fence around it, then it belongs to you.
Why did the Red Indians speak to him in the first place? He should have to get out. It's my land.
Well, they couldn't understand English because...
What I'm trying to say to you is that we are very kind people around the world, and we've given away our stuff.
But we haven't given it away, we just haven't done anything with it.
Pardon?
We haven't given it away, we just haven't done enough with it.
Well, I mean, people have just come and taken it, and then to turn around and tell you you're a second-class citizen.
Listen, if somebody comes to my house to eat dinner and then wants to walk off with my daughter, I'll have something to say about it.
Well, I don't know, but what when they walk out and you don't even realize they're taking your china and everything else, and you've got no plates left when they've left? I wonder how you feel. And that's what's happened to many Africans. They've realized now, after all these years, what have we got from all these people coming in and taking our stuff? I get so angry when I see Africa and I don't see running water in people's... I know we have it because I've been there myself and I see they've got it. But all those villages that don't have running water, I'm thinking, why don't you have running water? Why doesn't anybody come and put that in for you? They all come into Africa and looking at it, we want your oil, we want your gold, we want your diamonds, we want your coffee. Why aren't you putting anything back? Proper roads, they need that. Why aren't we building those things out there? And these are the things I want to see the investment of. I don't care about my few pounds going into some investment bank. I want to see people investing in the infrastructure of Africa so that people have a good life. I mean, when I see Syria being bombed, those cities look fantastic. Aleppo, look a beautiful country. Look how they bombed it. Why hasn't Africa got beautiful cities like that, built so powerful? I just understand it. And we're talking about a few pounds investing in some African development. I quite agree, do that. But we have more. We have more than that. We have more than that.
Ray, good evening.
Yeah.
My name's Maureen.
I'm Colin.
Hi.
Ray, yeah.
Did you say it's Ray, isn't it?
Yeah, Ray.
Yes. I just wanted to say that you have a very, very valid point. There are no two ways about it. But always remember that in certain situations, you have to have the political will. Would you agree? The political will of the leaders and then the people as well must be joining together. So what you've said is spot on, but the fact of the matter is, what are we going to do about it?
Well, when you talk about politics, we're right in the middle of some very strange politics going on in Europe and in America with Trump and Hillary Clinton. I like Hillary, but...
The Caribbean and Africa. No, I'm not worried right now about Europe and America.
Politics.
Let's talk about Europe and America have what they took.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about what's left in Africa?
Have we got anything back from it? Slavery and all that, we haven't been paid for.
We're going to be paid, so reparations is probably something not to worry about. But I'll let one of my colleagues have a word with you as well. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, interesting conversation.
Ray, this is Deliata speaking. First of all, there are some great cities. I visit Nigeria regularly. Abuja is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a jewel in the crown. But I think the other thing to remember is all of this, what have we got back? Yes, governments have stepped in, but getting back to our topic on Brexit, maybe leaving the EU will stop any dependence or looking for European handouts, because if UK aren't getting handouts from the EU, and a lot of UK farmers and things have been dependent on handouts, Africa may not get the handouts, but privately we can invest. Yes, we need the governments in Africa to put the roads and infrastructure in, but it's incredible what private can do once the basics are put in.
It's taking such a long time. These people have been waiting for their water supply to their houses and their bathrooms and their toilets for centuries now. It's time that these things were put in. I'm seeing people living very well off of Africa for centuries now here in Britain and around the world. Many, you talk about investments into the little companies we have. It's not little people that invest in Africa. It's huge billionaires and trillionaires who invest in Africa. That's where they make their money. And we could be doing it too, but we're not seem to getting any. We can't even get. What I'm saying is, with all these billions and trillions passing around, why don't they have running water throughout the whole of Africa for all the Africans to have in their homes? They have bathrooms and toilets and running nicely, lovely houses painted, lovely streets. Why don't we have it? That's what I'm angry about.
Ray, how are you? This is Priscilla.
Oh yeah,
I share your sentiments, and I think I also share your frustration. But if we look at the situation now, what we're trying to deal with here is what will change with the Brexit. Obviously, I want to stand back from the references, the colonial references, the slavery references. I think we are way past that today. The geopolitical climate has changed. At some point, you don't even know that Britain had any ties with anybody anymore. If you talk about what China is doing in Africa, you talk about what other countries are doing where, who is playing where, you don't even want to know who is whose colonial past anymore. What really we should be thinking about, and that's why we are here on this show, is to share ideas on what we can give back, what we can bring. We cannot just sit down and say everything has been stolen. Of course, the water has not been stolen. Of course, Nigeria, these are country belts that are not dry. They get rain. Go and see what they have done in India. They've actually used their infrastructure when rains come to build their building designs, and all these things have been put into place in a way that they can harness this water. The environmental standards also included. So we should actually be trying to reorientate the way we think, to be sort of like forward-looking and positive, because change has come. And whatever you say, I mean, it's not, things are not going to stay the way they are. We must also change the way we think. Rather than blaming, we should be thankful that we are still here and we can do something about it. At least once upon a time, we could hardly talk about it, you and I, but today we've given the opportunity to be part of these conversations and to direct it the way it should go.
Yeah, Ray,
okay?
Thanks a lot for the call. And sorry, did anybody else want to come back on that? Thanks a lot for the call, Ray. I really appreciate it. You've certainly set the cat amongst the pigeons in this studio. 0207224220. We'll take more thoughts on this as well. But what Ray is saying, Jonathan, is, you know, a lot of people's perceptions start off from a negative position. And this is partly because, I don't know, the way that the Caribbean or Africa is still perceived. And there is a bridge that needs to be made between how people think things are out there and what things are really like. For example, earlier on, I think it was Dele that said, or was it indeed Priscilla that said that, you know, Africa isn't as, you know, as bereft of trade as you think it might be. I'm just struck by the fact that when I was last in Nigeria in 2010, you see so much business being done on the streets of Lagos, let's say, by ordinary people, you know, men and women, children, etc. And you look, you think, hang on, there are millions of pounds being exchanged on this very street, this little street alone, over the course of a day. This country isn't as poor as it seems. How do you, even from a business perspective, you've got to, I'm presuming your company also has investors, and your investors say, you know, invest in something that is safe, something that I can trust. Invest in the New York Stock Exchange. And you're saying, no, I'm going to invest in the Jamaican Stock Exchange. And people like Ray might be saying, hang on, these countries are still struggling. How do you convince people, ordinary people, the people with the money, you know, ordinary people, you and I, to go and invest in a country where they don't have the faith in it?
Sure. Well, I think, I mean, the first part of that question was, you know, the negativity that obviously, you know, that you get a sense from Ray there that he's frustrated because there's obviously some form of relation or family tie to Africa. I sense from him, and he, of course, isn't happy with the level of progress that he's seen. You know, in his own opinion, of course. Going back to, you know, what countries around the world are doing first and foremost is, you'd be amazed. I mean, we've just came back from a trade mission in China, right, where they, as the second biggest economy in the world, have realized that, in their words, that just copying existing IP and copying ideas and producing them at a lower price is not going to be sustainable. They were paying for British tech companies to come out there to teach them innovation. The whole purpose of this trade mission is to provide the sort of support, education, training and collaboration to help new businesses in the Caribbean in technology and services grow as well. To answer your question on the investment side, we personally do not go into or advise clients to just list on listed companies already in the stock market, right? That's not what we're about. Did that before and focus now, of course, predominantly and only on private companies that we can invest in now. And if I'm saying to an investor here in the UK, you should be investing into this business based out of Jamaica, it would be because the product or service or margins that they have right now, combined with the resources that we could add to that existing company that investor understands and knows that is based here, but we're incorporating that technology for that product or service to grow it in the Caribbean and also internationally. And then with the future opportunity of listing it, that could well make sense. We'll wait and see come January, of course, but that's where my thinking is in that.
Sean Robinson, are we geared up? Is Black Britain ready to take the bull by the horns and deal with whatever the world offers and how the world is able to engage with us in a post-Brexit world? Are we geared up for that? Do we have the intellectual property that we've heard so much about in this programme, that we're ready and geared up from that? From what you understand?
Of course we are.
You say of course?
Yes.
Mr. Positive over here. It'll be fine.
Yeah, of course we are. Sure we are. But we don't really understand it, do we? I mean, I say Black Britons. You could say, Britain's generic Britain as well. That we hear the government say over and over again, we can do our own business. We can do our own business deals. But what does that mean? What does that mean? Because we're used to doing business in a certain way with people that we know and understand, who understand the way that we operate.
Yeah.
We're used to doing business. We're not used to going into territories that we're not familiar with, are we?
Of course we are. Yeah, we're ready. Of course we can.
Do you do business in Russia?
Do personally, no.
Do you? Right. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you were suddenly to think about doing business in Russia, are you geared up for it? Probably not.
If you're
China,
if you're in the industry of business, you got to be prepared to take your business anywhere in the world. There should be no boundaries at all.
But you know the mindset of, let's say, and I'm not being patronising by saying this, but one business that was very popular in the black community in Britain over the last 30, 40, 50 years or so is your humble patty shop.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that they fight a struggle to make themselves relevant in Britain, whereas you might have an Indian takeaway doing very good business, and everybody feels that an Indian curry is now the national dish.
Yeah.
The food from the Caribbean or from Africa still struggles to make itself relevant in the context of foods in this country. We haven't even won the battle over here in our businesses, and I'm not just talking about patty shops, whatever businesses that we have. We're fighting a battle over here to make ourselves relevant, mainstream, etc. in many ways. Not in IT, like Dele's in IT, and IT is, if you like, a faceless and colourless and cultureless
I agree.
Industry. But in other industries, why are we looking overseas when we haven't even won a battle here that we should be fighting?
Times are changing. Times are definitely changing. The market's changing, and there is opportunity.
Dotun, I'd like to say it's about skills and it's about promotion.
Have we got the skills? Remember, that was the question I was asking, really. Have we got the skills?
We can repatriate the skills because
From
they're
where?
soft skills. There are individuals and companies in the UK which are Afro-Caribbean owned, and if they would look outward and back to the countries of their origin, they could export
Should
those
they
skills.
not be fighting the battle here first? Do they not need to win the battle over here in this country first before they start looking overseas?
They may be able to, but they may be restrained by capital. And I think you use the reggae sauce as an example. With the right promotion, and that's about know-how and the soft skills, there's no reason why brands can't be established that are global.
I know Dr. Schwartz wants to come back on this. Bear with us. We're going to come back straight on this point in just a moment. But first, let's get the latest BBC Radio London travel and now news. Yeah, so we're going to wrap up this conversation now. 02722422000. Keep the calls coming in, though, right till 10 o'clock, after which Duncan Barks takes over the wheels of steel. And just to remind you, in the studio with me, we'll get a final word from each of them. Maureen Smith of Tropical Connections, Sean Robinson of Robinson Davis Properties, Jonathan Farl of Rockstar Group, Dr. Priscilla Schwartz of the Royal Docks School of Business and Law, and we've also got Dele Atta with us, who's the Managing Director of Bizitas. What is Bizitas, by the way? What is Bizitas? It's an IT company.
It's people process technology. We look at what companies do. We meet their people. We look at process and try and streamline it and improve it, and then we attempt to deliver the right technology. So it's in the basis of accounting, stock, CRM, all of the things that most businesses need to keep control and report on what they're doing.
And Dr. Schwartz, when Dele was talking a moment ago about the challenges faced by companies, he felt that the companies here in Britain can face international challenges. My argument was they're still facing challenges over here. Why would anybody want to expand and think of doing trade deals elsewhere when they haven't really locked down the UK yet? And you wanted to come in, I know.
I wanted to come in from a supposition you made between the Indian curries and why on the African and Caribbean traditional probably food stuff and whatnot are not doing as well. And I just wanted perhaps to suggest that the products that are sort of like go into these various cuisine, they're quite expensive which makes the Afro-Caribbean or African traditional dishes very, very, very much expensive than you would say a curry.
That's because of trade tariffs, is it? Because of the tariffs?
Because they are coming.
In the Caribbean and in Africa, they're not as expensive, are they?
No,
exactly.
Because
it's because of trade tariffs.
It's more expensive importing them into these countries, and they are foodstuff. They could perish. They could, and
you will know, until quite recently, a lot of those foodstuffs were sold to us by people of an Asian background. Now a lot of places in Peckham, etc., sell the foodstuffs, and people of Caribbean or African backgrounds sell it. The point I was really trying to make is it seems as if whether it's Indian products are much more generic and have become part of the mainstream, but African products haven't.
It would seem like that.
It would seem like that. Is that not the case then?
I would say it would seem like that because really it's a matter of opinion, but it is quite true that most of these products are sold. There's so much more entrepreneurial skills on one set of the whatnot, and on the African Caribbean, what you tend to get is more of skills set and professionalism and services. So if really we could tap that to go back, and those are the things that we have not really focused on, even out in the Caribbean or Africa or in Africa, because we've been focusing too much on products, and products have not been doing well.
Let's go around the table and just get a final word from each of you. And the reason that we've had this conversation today is because of a proposed UK Caribbean trade mission, which has taken place in January and February of 2017 in Jamaica and Barbados. It's the second of its sort, and it aims to bring together businesses from over here and businesses over there and link them up to do business. And it's the kind of thing that you'd have thought that the Prime Minister would praise, and I imagine she will between now and then. Theresa May is very keen, as you will know, because she says Brexit means Brexit, to make sure the British businesses link up with other businesses elsewhere and do their own trade deals directly. Now, going round the table, how successful do you think, be frank now, how successful do you think a Caribbean trade mission like this will be, Sean Robinson? Do you think it will be a game changer, if you like?
Yeah. Personally, I think it should. I think it will change, and I think it will encourage a lot of change in the market. I think it'd be a definite good thing for the Caribbean and Africa. Yeah, I agree.
Maureen Smith of Tropical Connections.
The gentleman who invited me on this program, when I said to him, should I join him on should Tropical Connections look at joining the trade mission, and what W11 FM, what's in it for me? He said, not really. And I thought he just didn't want my company. But he said that Tropical Connections has done something similar to what the Trade Mission has done, because we've made links with different people and businesses in the Caribbean already. So this time around, apart from maybe carrying somebody's suitcase, but this time around, it's probably not something we should do.
It's not for businesses that already have links in the Caribbean. It's for businesses that don't have links in the Caribbean. Right. To what extent, Dr. Priscilla Schwartz, do you think it'll be a game changer, if I can put it that way?
To the extent that companies from the UK try to go into these countries, try to get a foothold, link with SMEs, small, medium enterprises, because there are a lot of investment projects that are, especially in the area of infrastructure, that are needed in these countries. IT services, as Dele was saying, outsourcing. There's a population there that they can use. So going there, getting a foothold, joining, they can create a base. They can create a base from which the link can begin to exist. And also, I think it'll be good to have, when the Brexit, the trade links and arrangements are being done, to have the ACP countries to sort of like be invited, those who are in this area, the business people who are knowledgeable in those areas, to be part of the conversation as we are doing here, so that we can have a broader perspective. We have to work collectively. This is a newborn baby we are having, and we can give it any kind of name we want.
And Jonathan Fowle of Rockstar, thank you. Jonathan Fowle of Rockstar Group, do you think it'll be about having the conversation first, or do you think real business will be done in this trade deal in January and February?
Shaking hands, of course. Signing checks within the week or two, no. And that's just from experience. And, what one wants to get out of it, of course, and achieve, is to be realistic in the objectives that you've got. Will it be an absolute game changer? I think it depends on what side of the fence that you're looking at. I think that the opportunity from both sides, and there are different opportunities from the UK companies that are going over there, the opportunity is two things. What can they do to increase their productivity and to maybe sell more into that country, and also assist and collaborate with the existing companies that are over there, and of course to even potentially float more cost effectively on such a market, because they, as the Caribbean governments and the markets, are very, very keen, as I said before, to get more companies listed there. So that's the opportunity from that side. From the other side, of course, it's what connections can they make in order to open up new markets to sell their products and services. So but these things, of course, take time.
And Del Atta, your company's going for the second time on this trade mission. What can you hopefully be able to do there, do you think, that will make a difference?
Well, I think Brexit presents an opportunity, because it left people between a rock and a hard place. If it remained, certain Afro-Caribbean businesses, what I felt, people have said they felt somewhat marginalised. There was a focus on Europe, which wasn't their heritage, their history. But Brexit gives a different dynamic, because no one's quite sure exactly what the business landscape and the trade landscape will look like in 2 or 3 years' time. And that new dynamic, as I say, with no EU grants, has to mean that attitudes will change. There's a huge opportunity, and both sides can win from it.
Listen, thank you all very much. I really appreciate you coming in. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thanks very much to Del Atta there of Bizitaz. Thanks to Jonathan Fowle of Rockstar Group. Thanks very much to Dr. Priscilla Schwartz of the Royal Dock School of Business and Law, to Maureen Smith of Tropical Connections, and to Sean Robinson of Robinson Davies Properties. Incidentally, if any of you are interested in finding out more about this trade mission, it's the Caribbean Caribbean Enterprise Priority Group International Trade Mission to Jamaica and Barbados takes place from 22nd of January to the 2nd of February of next year.